The best part of this business, the free food. It's been a very good 4 years. I put on some weight because there's a lot of free food here. I'm not complaining about it. I don't have a grocery bill. I did get a little chubby though. It's just me. It's actually the last year of our lease here. I never thought we'd get to this point. It seemed like a distant stretch that would never exist, but you're looking at someone who's on the last year of their lease. I never thought this day would come. For some odd reason, it seemed like a lifetime would have to go by before I actually have to consider re-signing the lease. So yes, this video is about how to sign a commercial lease and how my lease is ending and where I'm going to from here and what to watch out for in 5 easy steps on when you're signing your own commercial lease, because most likely you will have one. I assume so if you have any brick and mortar business. We have taken 3 days off in a row, which we haven't done in probably 2 years now, because in this small business, when you're working with all perishables, it is very hard to just say, you know what, we're taking 3 days off, we're taking 4 days off. Even 2 days off can be quite hard when you have fresh food that will expire or go bad if you leave it too long, or it won't look as fresh simply if you wait too long. Because in this business, you always have to be very, very busy, and you always want to keep things rotating out the door and keeping the fresh stuff coming in as soon as possible. So if you have no idea what I'm talking about and you're new here, Felicia and I have owned this grocery store for going on 4 years now in a couple days. It's actually the last year of our lease in this space. And our channel is all about growing a small business, owning a small business, starting a small business, and in general, personal finance. So if you'd like any of that, please like this video. It helps people get more information on our channel and really helps grow this store and this channel. Okay, so first, before we get into this video, on how to sign a commercial lease, or how to, sign your first commercial lease, no matter whatever it is. My first piece of advice would, don't lock yourself into a 5-10 year lease on a very, very new business that you don't have experience in. I've mentioned this in a lot of our videos before. Just don't do it. It can get ugly if things go sour. A lot of small businesses fail within the first few years, and then you're left paying the rent on things. So let's just keep that in mind before we sign anything. Do your research, please, on your business. Maybe you need to start smaller than you think. Just a commercial lease is such a binding document between your landlord and tenant. It's very hard to get out of if you need to. So yeah, let's keep that in mind before everything starts here. We are going through our inventory. We had to do a lot of restocking. We're checking our dates now. Again, when you're closed for a couple days in this business, you got to be on top of what's looking good, what's looking outdated, and keep everything out the door. And then I end up eating it all if it's expired. So something we never really discussed on this channel was our lease, how to sign a commercial lease. Because many people, you may sign a lease for an apartment or a house or whatever it may be for a year. But when it comes to commercial leases, it's almost like a different side of the spectrum that most people don't really know about until they actually want to start their own business with a space. And if you're fortunate enough to own your own space, that's even better. But most of the business owners that I know have a landlord, and they lease a space for, between 1, 3, 5, 10 years, maybe more, depending on the circumstances. So we signed our lease about 4 years ago now. And honestly, when I signed that lease, I was really kind of uneducated on what it would really entail. We did a lot of research, but without actually knowing what our day-to-day was going to look like, the lease was so hard to comprehend. And looking back when we signed it, it was just it's about 40 to 50 pages for a store like this. And there's just so much, I'm not going to say nonsense, there's so much material that is included in this lease. And a lot of it is, in your lawyer's terms. It's not in simple terms like me and you like to discuss on this channel, like we like to talk in everyday life. It can be a lot of jargon. It can be a lot of really overstretching how things are discussed in normal life. Something as simple as who's responsible for damages on our front glass door becomes the tenant is responsible for this, and this. The landlord is responsible for this, and this. As long as you're not defaulting on the rent by this many days, or you've paid your rent at this time and this time, or depending on if it is an act of God or a civil unrest against the store, who's responsible in that point? It's just so many added things to usually protect your landlord in a commercial lease that I'm going to advise you the first most important thing to do with your commercial lease is to get a lawyer that you can trust, who's not associated to your landlord at all, to look over your lease thoroughly and tell him exactly what you want to do with your business. Tell him exactly what you're going to be doing day in, day out, and he will scope it out. Tell him where exactly the location is going to be, and they will comb through it, if they're a good lawyer, with a fine-tooth comb, I guess, and just pick it apart so you are not being taken advantage of. And I look back at the time when we signed our lease, and it was just one of those things that was taking so long for all the lawyers to agree on everything, the landlord to agree on everything. I made the rash decision, and I regret it, just to get this thing signed. I was telling my lawyer to just, leave certain things be because I want to get started. I want to open the business. We're spending money every day renovating it, and this lease is becoming, a 5-6 month thing just to figure out now. And my regret is telling them to kind of back off and letting us just sign this thing, because there is a few things that, we still could have fought for if I was more patient with when I started this business that still affect us in the day-to-day, and we're going to get into that as well. So, step number 2 would be, do not let your landlord restrict your business in any way, shape, or form. You're paying him the monthly rent. You're locked into this lease. You're probably going to be spending money renovating your space. Do not let your landlord tell you what you can do, can't do, what time, when. You are in charge of your business. You do not work for your landlord. He's not your manager. If you wanted to be an employee, you could do this somewhere else without all the risk. Don't let them restrict you on what you can sell, who you can hire. I don't know if anyone would restrict who you can hire, but definitely what you can sell, what your business operating hours have to be, or anything of the sort, because it will affect you more than you know for the long term. And you may not think so when you're signing your lease. You're like, oh, you know what? This is not a big deal. I don't even really want to do that or do this. But there's going to come a time in your business when you go do that thing that your landlord restricted you on doing. And here you are. You can't do it because the lease is the final word. Even if you argue you're a good tenant, no matter what, your lease is always the final word. Every clip we do, I pretend to organize a shelf, but then I actually end up organizing shelves that I don't usually look at. So thank you to anybody watching this video. You help organize this store indirectly. Give yourself a pat on the back and like this video, and everybody's happy. Okay, so that leads into step number 3. Try not to be restricted too much. There will be times where you can't do certain things. You can fight them, and I suggest fighting them. Don't just sign away your life and your business. But the flip side of that coin is you want to be able to restrict your landlord from doing the same thing you're doing in your business. For example, we restricted anybody coming into this plaza to sell grocery, right? We don't want to compete with anybody selling grocery. And that was actually good because there was a tenant that was looking to open a small grocery store in the other side of the plaza. And our lease was the final word. It restricted our landlord. He could not do it. I don't even think he really bothered even trying to do it because he knew how much we fought in our lease to make sure we had a restriction that no one else around could sell grocery. And it really saved us because if we didn't have that, your landlord wants to make as much money as possible. Let's not beat around the bush. Your landlord doesn't really care about your business. Your landlord wants his rent, and yes, he wants your business to work so you could pay him the rent, but he's not going to be worried if you're not, making the money that you want to in your business. He just wants to rent out his space. He doesn't want any vacancies. If another grocery store wanted to open and that wasn't in my lease, he would have put that store in there. No matter if he's a nice guy or not, it's a business to him, and I'm just happy it was in our lease to restrict him. That gives us an example, of how powerful commercial leases can be. As long as you're paying your rent for the lease that you have, then no one should be able to touch you if you put the proper restrictions in place against you and hopefully for you. And to give you an example of that, in our store, there's a deli nearby right in the same plaza that the landlord owns. And usually in plazas, they only like to have one pizza place, one barber, one Indian restaurant, because people don't want to compete in the same plaza. It doesn't make much sense. But when we opened our store, we were planning on just doing fruits and vegetables, and the restriction our landlord put on us was we are not allowed to sell lunch meat, cold cuts, if you want to call it that, because of the pre-existing deli in the corner. Now, Felicia and I didn't think we'd ever want to do that. We didn't need to. We were just going to do a produce store. However, now we know how much people consume that in their diets, and we would love to be able to have a nice 3-door cooler with prepackaged lunch meats, or even an employee serving lunch meat. Well, we were restricted by the landlord, and we should have fought that a little bit harder. We let that one go. I don't know where our business, if it would be much better with lunch meat or maybe a little bit better, but at this point there's nothing we can do because it's in the restriction, and we can't really ever sell that type of product. So step number 5 could be one of the most important steps, and I don't know, they're all really, really important. You can't leave one of these out. But step number 5 is negotiating everything in your lease. From the timeline of your lease, from the cost of your rent, from the cost of how much you're paying for the maintenance of the property, because there's going to be your rent price, your taxes, and then your maintenance costs. And everything can be negotiable. I mean, the taxes you can't really negotiate too much on. That's more of a government. That's of course the government's way of getting some more money out of you. But I'm talking, your landlord will try to get you for the most money for the most time. And you're trying to find the perfect balance in between that for the time you want on this lease and the amount of money you can afford to pay monthly and still keep your place running. It kind of encapsulates everything. Encapsulates. This kind of covers everything we were talking about. You're negotiating everything, what you're restricted on, what your landlord can and can't do. He'll even come down to what days you need to be open. You can negotiate everything. Everything is negotiable. Nothing is set in stone, no matter what his real estate agent tells you, no matter what he tells you. You can negotiate anything you want. So make sure you're not intimidated or you feel like you don't have a say in things. This is your lease just as much as it is his. You are the one running this place day in and day out. You are the one spending money to operate this business and renovate most likely his space. So which again, you can negotiate. That reminds me, you can negotiate the amount of money that he allows you to renovate his space. It may be zero, oftentimes it can be zero. But if he really wants to rent the space and you have other options, he may give you a certain allowance to help you renovate. So just be aware that everything has some wiggle room, let's call it that. So I'm going to end this video right here. I think we've covered how to sign a commercial lease as best as we could from my knowledge. We can go on and on with these topics and these points just in depth for each business, but this is what worked for us in our personal experience. These are the mistakes that we want you to avoid by watching this channel, and we'll keep growing this business as you keep growing or starting or owning your own. Have a good day, beautiful people of the world. Felicia doesn't want to be on video today, but she was just dancing.